Welcome to Emotionally Healthy Legacy. My name is Elizabeth, and here we talk about emotional wellness and motherhood, how to learn to manage our feelings well, how we can show up better for our family so we can leave a healthy legacy for our children. Hi, mamas. I'm so glad you're joining me today. As I'm recording this, I am looking outside and it is snowing like crazy. I live in Minnesota and it's 10:30 in the morning and it's beautiful snow outside. I do like Minnesota because the snow is pretty. I do not like the cold. I think we would have moved a long time ago if it wasn't for family. But snow is beautiful. The fresh snow is just absolutely gorgeous. Today we're going to be talking about the human brain and what happens in our brain when we feel emotions. I think it is extremely important to understand. This is something I did not know before I started going to counseling for my kids' behavior, and that is something that became the basis, the foundation to understand to human behavior, why we act a certain way, why when we are overwhelmed and stressed out and frustrated, it seems like almost impossible for us to respond in a positive way and handle the situation in a helpful way, and to learn what our brain needs to calm down and to respond in a helpful way. So that's what we'll be talking about today, our human brain and the way it works. The first part of our brain that we're going to talk about is our thinking brain. It is our prefrontal cortex. It's located right where your forehead is. That part of the brain is when we're thinking straight. That's when we learn. That part of the brain is working. When we make logical, wise choices, when we respond positively, it helps us control our impulses. It is mature and it regulates our emotions. That part of the brain we use for problem solving and logical choices. It does not develop until our mid-20s. That's why we see teenagers and kids do such silly, immature things, because that part of the brain is just not developed yet. The second part of the brain is further back. It is an emotional center of our brain. That's where our feelings and emotions live. I call that part of the brain the feeling brain. It's just easier when I explain it to my kids, the thinking brain and the feeling brain. When we are in that part of the brain, we say and do things that we don't really mean and are many times disrespectful, and we take it out on our kids and we respond negatively, because when we shift to that emotional part of the brain, when something triggers us and we shift to that part of our brain, our thinking brain turns off and our blood flow goes to our feeling brain, and we start making impulses and choices and decisions that are not mature and that are not helpful. The next part of our brain is the survival part of our brain. That's where the brain stem, like back of your head, that part of the brain. That part of our brain is our fight or flight or freeze. That's when we end up actually screaming and yelling. That's when that part of the brain is turned on, where we literally just like throw in the towel and just walk away. You're like, I'm done. That's it. Like, I just can't do this. One more thing, I'm just going to blow up. And we walk away because the situation gets too overwhelming, or we freeze and completely shut down. So all humans have those three parts of the brain: our thinking brain, our logical, problem-solving brain, our emotional, where we get annoyed, frustrated, irritated, kind of angry, that part of the brain. And then when we're really triggered and we just respond really negatively, that's our survival part of the brain. That's when it's like a complete meltdown tantrum, screaming, yelling. That part of the brain is turned on. So what happens is when we experience uncomfortable emotions such as feeling tired, hungry, or we feel overwhelmed, sad, just down or stressed out or irritated, what happens in our brain are it shuts off our thinking brain. and it goes to our feeling brain. Because the body thinks that the thinking brain is not essential for survival, so we shift to our emotional or survival brain, and we end up responding negatively because that part of the brain is not able to make good positive choices. When we are in the emotional and survival parts of the brain, we do not act positively and we respond negatively to our kids, and many times we get sucked into their emotions. Okay, so what happens when we are feeling super uncomfortable emotions, when we are overwhelmed, sad, stressed out, irritated, or angry? There's three things that happen in humans. We either turn it out on others, which comes across as disrespect, aggression, blame, being mean or rude. I think we all have experienced that, especially with our kids, when we are angry and we just turn it out on them without even meaning to. We don't want to actually hurt them and say mean and rude things. It almost seems like, oh my gosh, I cannot even control this emotion. It just like comes out of me. The second thing is we turn it in on ourselves and we become super negative and we say things to ourselves like, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so dumb, no one likes me, I'm like the worst mom. It's like a negative internal talk. Or the third thing that we might be doing is numbing it. I've done this. I think many people do this. Social media, watching TV, eating sugar, sometimes even drinking alcohol. Some people turn to that because emotions are so uncomfortable and it's just too hard to face them, and you need to do something to numb them out because feeling it is just too uncomfortable. When our kids misbehave and disrespect us or are aggressive, we start feeling out of control. So something happens that triggers their brain. They feel like they are out of control and they freak out. When they start experiencing disrespect, aggression, anger, that triggers us and it shifts our brain from our logical part of our brain to our emotional or survival part of the brain. And when we feel overwhelmed and stressed and stretched thin, our brain does not respond positively. We become irritated, annoyed, and we are almost like unable to act maturely. And our kids' misbehavior can push us over the edge into survival brain, and that's when we end up yelling and screaming. If we don't address the uncomfortable emotion, the behavior won't change. So there's a few things that I have learned to do for myself in the moment when things get super overwhelming and uncomfortable with my kids. I can give you an example. The other week, I was sitting at my office table in the living room, and my son came up to me and he's like, "Can you feed me the soup?" Because he didn't finish his soup earlier in the day. And I said, "No, Matthew, you need to go eat at the table in the kitchen." And he still set the bowl of soup on my table and started eating it. And I was busy with something else, so I didn't even notice it. And then he came up to take another spoonful, and when he was turning around to walk away, somehow he tipped the soup bowl and it fell all over the floor and it soaked into the carpet. And oh my goodness, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, this is what I was thinking. I'm like, I've told you to eat in the kitchen. You chose to disobey me, and now I obviously have to clean this up because, like, you're a 5-year-old kid. You will not be able to clean this up in the best way because it's little pieces of vegetables and with, like, soaked liquid into the carpet. So I said, "Matthew, I need you to go upstairs now. I'm very frustrated. I'm very overwhelmed. I need you to go upstairs." And then as I'm dealing with this, there's two things that work best for me that I have learned that my brain remembers to do in the moment. One of them is deep breathing and the other one is affirmations. So there's certain things that we can do as moms outside of the moment that help our brain de-escalate and to shift back to our thinking brain when we shift to the emotional part of the brain. So the first thing for me that I do is deep breaths. When I do deep breathing, it calms my nervous system down and it shifts me back to my thinking brain, so I'm not acting on my emotions as much. And the second thing is affirmations. That's the second thing I do. So I'm taking deep breaths. I send all the kids upstairs and I'm like, this is what it is right now. I don't like it, but I'm going to get through this. I've got this. I can do this. So I'm not denying what I'm feeling. I'm allowing my body to feel the frustration and irritation, but I'm also doing deep breaths to calm my nervous system down and to shift my brain into more positive state versus being so emotional and on edge. So those are the two things that I want to touch on that I think is a skill that most parents don't use and actually don't even know about. That is something I have learned in therapy. That is something I practice outside the moment on a regular basis, almost every single day. And my body has learned that this is what I need in order to help me calm down. In order for our brain to know and learn the skill to switch back from the emotional part of the brain into our thinking brain, that is something we actually have to teach our brain. That doesn't happen naturally. It's a skill that we have to reteach our brain because we've been responding a certain way, let's say for 30, maybe I'm 31, so maybe 30, 35, 40 years, we've been responding a certain way to situations, to frustration and irritation. If you grew up in a family where you yelled a lot, that's just going to come out of you naturally. If you grew up in a family where you turn in the emotion on yourself and become very negative and bitter and resentful, that's going to come out. Or if you've just been taught or learned the skill to just numb the emotion, you're just going to do that naturally. In order to teach your brain and literally create new pathways in your brain to respond differently and positively, you have to repeat it about 500 to 1,000 times in order for it to become automatic. So what I mean by that is when you're feeling frustrated and irritated, for your brain to start, let's say, deep breathing on its own without you having to even think about it or intentionally do it, for it to deep breathe and to de-escalate you, shift you back to your thinking brain, you have to intentionally practice it at least 500 times in order for your brain to change it into an automatic way of handling that sort of emotion. So there's a few things that I do on a regular basis outside of the moment that teach my nervous system to calm down. And when I'm feeling the frustration and irritation and annoyance and anger, which happens, on a regular basis, we're moms, we deal with kids, right? We have life happening to us. We get a phone call about something, there's tension between you and your spouse, whatever it might be. We all experience these feelings, but I have taught my brain and created new pathways in my brain to respond positively. Probably more so than not. I'm still learning, I'm still practicing, but it's been so helpful for me. So the first thing that I do on a regular basis, it is deep breathing. When we do deep breathing, what happens in our brain, it shifts from emotional or cerebral part of the brain. It sends the blood flow back to our thinking brain and it calms our nervous system down. The deep breaths are so valuable and important, and I think most of us were not taught that as kids. Maybe you've been taught oh, go take a breath, but realistically, you were never truly taught how to do that. Deep breaths, slowly in, holding it, and slowly out, and repeating that multiple times. Every morning when I get up before my kids, one of the things that's part of my morning ritual is I lay down on the floor with my feet up the wall because it sends more blood flow to my brain, and I do deep breathing for several minutes. I do deep breath in, hold it on the count of 4, and then breathe out on the count of 4. And I repeat that multiple times. As I'm doing that, it creates new pathways in my brain. So then when I am feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and irritated, my brain is able to access that part of the brain to remember to make that choice to do deep breathing in the moment. Because if you don't practice it outside of the moment, your brain will not be able to access it and do it in the moment of frustration and irritation. Because you remember, when you're feeling emotional or you're in your survival brain, your thinking brain is shut off. In order for you to do deep breathing, your thinking brain needs to be able to turn back on. If you practice this outside of the moment on a regular basis, your brain will be like, oh, that's right. I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do in order to de-escalate and calm my nervous system down and not get sucked in. So deep breathing, that is something I do every single day. And if you ask my kids, they will tell you that their mom deep breathes a lot. Actually, a lot. My oldest one says it's really annoying, but I asked him, I'm like, do you want me to yell at you? Or would you rather have mommy be annoying and deep breathe? He's like, yeah, I'd rather have you be annoying. I'm like, yeah, me too. I'd rather deep breathe than actually lose it and get sucked in and yell at my kids. And then the second thing that I do a lot is the positive affirmations. That is also part of my morning ritual. When I lay with my feet up the wall and I do deep breathing, the second thing is positive affirmations. I've got this. I can do this. The phrase that I say a lot to myself when something is super uncomfortable, something I don't like, when I'm super frustrated. I already said it earlier. This is what it is right now. I don't like it. Like the frustration, the irritation, the anger, but I will get through this. So I'm not denying the feeling. I'm allowing myself to feel that feeling, but I'm also affirming myself that I will get through this. And then I tell myself, I've got this. I can do this. As I'm deep breathing, I'm internally saying those things to me. Positive affirmations also calm your nervous system down. And so what happens in the moment when I hear my kids screaming, I'm downstairs washing dishes and I hear my kids fighting upstairs. I'm like, okay, I've got this. I can do this. As I'm walking upstairs to handle my kids and whatever they're dealing with, I'm taking deep breaths. So I am more calm. I am more grounded as I'm walking into the situation of what's going on. And then there's the next thing that I want to say, praying. Praying also is like a huge thing that for me as a person of faith and having a personal relationship with God, that is also very important. In the moment, my brain doesn't always is able to access it, but I do know when I'm extremely overwhelmed, when I am very emotional, when I do remember, I ask my God, please help me get through this. When we give this feeling of, I'm like, God, I'm super angry right now. I don't want to blow up on my kids right now. Can you please help me through this emotion? And then I've got this. I can do this. This is what it is right now. I don't like it, but I'm going to get through this. Deep breaths. And for me, these have been game changers. I think for a lot of us, we're like, when we were growing up, they're like, when you're feeling angry or frustrated, they're like, parents would either shut it down or people would explode and respond in a negative way, but nobody ever taught us the skills how to handle that feeling that is so big and uncomfortable in a helpful way. Those are things that I do in the moment to help my brain feel safe in order for it to shift back to its thinking brain, that prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain is the one that helps me make the positive, more mature decision in the moment. There's also things that you can do as a parent on a regular basis that are helpful and healthy outside of the moment that help your brain, just in general, stay more grounded and calm and not feel as negative. These are some positive ways to release your negative feelings and emotions without numbing it, turning it out on others, or turning it in on yourself. The first thing is to pray. Pray about it and give it up to God. When we release that emotion to God, it's like He has these big hands that are helping us through this, to hold this and support us through this emotion. The second thing is journaling. Oh my goodness, I journal a lot. It helps me so much. When I was going through a really difficult time in my life, I journaled a ton every single day. I journaled a lot when I went through miscarriage. That was another super hard time in my life. I journaled all those emotions and feelings out. It just releases them from your brain and onto paper, and it lets go of that power. It's like you're transferring it from your brain onto paper. Deep breathing outside of the moment in order to train your brain to remember to do it in the moment. Crying is a wonderful way to release emotion. And I know that for many of us, we were probably taught not to do that, especially as children. You're like, oh, you're such a baby. Stop crying. Don't make such a big deal of it. Why are you so emotional? But crying is actually a very healthy, helpful way to release that emotion so it doesn't stay inside of us. Venting to a safe person. That is another super helpful way. My husband knows he's my person. My mom and my husband, if I'm having a hard day, if I'm struggling, those are the two people I know I can lean on and I can count on, that I can vent to, that I will receive validation and empathy. In order for a human brain to feel safe and shift back from our emotional state of the brain or a survival part of the brain, one of the things, I'm going to talk about this later on, our human needs to feel empathy and validation. Having safe people in our lives where we can get that negative emotion out, just getting it out just to vent is like super helpful. Hugging someone safe, hugging your spouse, or hugging a friend, hugging a parent if they are your safe person. Hugging someone helps us feel safe and not alone in that big feeling, and it also helps our brain to calm down. Physical activity to get your stress out, running, exercising, lifting, just even going for a walk. That is also super, super helpful to get that anger and frustration out in like a physical release. And then creative expression. That's also a super awesome way that we can release our emotions when we're super stressed out, overwhelmed, frustrated. When I was grieving the loss of the baby, I did a lot of coloring, adult coloring books. That's one of the things I like to do. You can either do painting. There's this amazing thing that's called Paint by Numbers. You can just order it on Amazon. Those are great. Listening to music. You can either do calm music or upbeat music that might lift you up. Playing music, if you play an instrument, that's also like an amazing way to release your stress and overwhelm. Creative expression, great thing. So what I want to kind of do an overview, as moms, we need to learn to manage our emotions in a healthy way, because when we do that, we end up setting a great example for our kids. I'm sure you heard of this phrase before. Your kids will not do what you say, they will do what you do. They take in so much and repeat so much of what you do and what you say. The things you do, not what you tell them to do or you say for them to do, but what you actually do. So setting an example for our kids. Because once we learn how to regulate our own emotions, then we will be able to handle our kids' big emotions and be present with them in that emotion without being sucked into it. Okay, mamas, so here are the takeaways from this podcast. As humans, we have three parts of our brain: our thinking brain, our feeling brain, and our survival brain. When we make positive choices, it's when we are in our thinking brain. When we start making negative choices, And then when we completely throw a tantrum, especially little ones, this is when we're an emotional or survival part of the brain. Emotional and survival part of the brain do not act maturely and cannot make positive choices in the moment. Second thing, it's easy to shift from your thinking brain to your emotional part of the brain. And in order to your brain to switch back to its thinking part of the brain, you have to be intentional by doing that. It doesn't come naturally. It's a skill that you need to teach your brain outside of the moment, so then your brain remembers how to do it in the moment. And the third thing is, if we learn how to manage our frustrating emotions and feelings, then we'll be able to teach our kids and educate them on how to handle their big emotions and frustrations. And we can literally leave an emotionally healthy legacy for our kids. Because let's be real, we all know people in our lives, maybe even in our immediate family, who do not handle feelings and emotions well. They explode on others, or they have addictions because they numb their own feelings, or they're super negative because they just stuff all those feelings inside, and then it comes out as rudeness and disrespect and just unpleasant people to be around. We want to have a better response, and so then we can teach our kids how to respond better. This is what I want you to walk away with today, that you need to be intentional. This doesn't just happen, and in order for you to make changes, you have to be applying this on a regular basis. It's not going to just happen overnight. It takes many, 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 many times of practicing, 500 to 1,000 times, in order for your brain to automatically shift into a positive way of responding instead of the normal automatic way you've been doing for 30 plus years. If what you learned today was really helpful to you, please let me know. Reach out to me on Instagram at Emotionally Healthy Legacy, and I would love to know your feedback, what you think, and what you also want to learn more about, because this is my passion. This is what I love to teach moms. So shout out to me on Instagram. Let me know if this was helpful for you and what else you would like to learn. See you next time.